While crystal chandeliers sparkled in the gold-plated lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, the man in the torn jacket seemed like he was from another world. As wealthy customers looked on with displeasure, the concierge moved to remove him. The man sitting in the penthouse above had no idea that his best friend was being humiliated downstairs. Hold on a minute. As you listened to that scene, what was the first thing that crossed your mind? First, write in the comments where you're listening from and what went through your mind. We give voice to forgotten heroes, and every day we share one story, but that story sometimes has the power to shake a society's conscience. If you value these stories, subscribe, hit the like button, turn on notifications, because the story about to begin isn't just about one man, it's about all of us. Are you ready? Then let's begin. In the heart of Chicago, rising above Michigan Avenue, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel stood as one of the city's most prestigious temples of hospitality. Each floor of the 52-story building represented wealth and luxury from another world. Crystal chandeliers hung from the marble lobby ceiling, while billionaire businessmen sipped their coffee on Italian leather chairs. The hotel's concierge, Marcus Webb, was a 35-year-old picture of perfection. With his Armani suit, gold cufflinks, and eyes that missed no detail, he had assumed the role of guardian of this luxurious world. For Marcus, only one thing mattered: preserving the hotel's prestige. That evening, David Stone sat in the penthouse suite. At 43, Stone was a billionaire businessman who had built a technology empire. However, behind his fortune lay another story. David had served as a soldier in Iraq 20 years ago and never fully shed the scars of war. Downstairs, the man entering through the hotel's revolving door came from a completely different world. Robert Hayes was 58 years old, with graying hair, a face lined with wrinkles, wearing a worn military jacket. On the left lapel of his jacket was a faded purple heart pin that most people wouldn't notice. Robert had been wandering the streets for 2 days. Chicago's cold winter weather had penetrated to his bones, and his last money had been spent on coffee that morning. The beds at the Veterans Aid Center were full, and he didn't know where he would spend the night. When he stepped into the warm lobby of the hotel, he just wanted to warm up a bit. Maybe he could sit in the corner chair and rest for 10 minutes. He wouldn't harm anyone, would sit quietly and then leave. Marcus Webb went on alert the moment he saw Robert enter through the door. Worn clothes, disheveled hair, generally problematic appearance, all of these immediately went into the threat category in Marcus's mind. Marcus quickly approached Robert. "Excuse me, may I help you?" Robert understood the coldness in Marcus's tone but tried to remain respectful. "I just wanted to warm up a bit. I'll leave right away. This is a private area, only for hotel guests." Marcus's voice began to rise. "If you don't have a reservation, you need to leave." Other customers in the lobby began to notice the situation. Women with expensive bags exchanged uncomfortable glances. Men in executive attire stopped their conversations and began to watch. "I understand," Robert said calmly. "Just 5 minutes, then I'll go." "No," Marcus replied harshly. "You'll leave right now. This type of person is not wanted here." These words were heard by everyone in the lobby. An elderly couple nodded their heads, as if thinking Marcus was right. A businessman turned to his phone, as if nothing had happened. Robert stood up, trying to preserve his dignity. "I'm a veteran. I fought for my country." A mocking expression appeared in Marcus's eyes. "Everyone says that. If you were really a veteran, you wouldn't be in this situation." These words echoed through the lobby. A pained expression appeared on Robert's face, but he didn't respond. He had been subjected to this kind of humiliation for years. Just then, in the penthouse suite on the 47th floor, David Stone had finished his business meeting. He was watching Chicago's night view through the window. The commotion in the lobby caught his attention. The scene he saw below froze him. He saw a man being forced out by the concierge, but he couldn't see the man's face clearly. Downstairs, Marcus decided to call security. "Security, come to the lobby. There's someone who needs to be removed." Robert shook his head. "I'll leave myself." He began walking toward the door. Just as he reached the door, Marcus made one last humiliation. "And don't come back. This kind of place isn't for your type." These words could be heard even from the 47th floor. David Stone pressed the intercom. "What's happening downstairs?" Marcus picked up the phone. "A homeless man was causing trouble, Mr. Stone. We handled it." "Can I see that man's face?" David's voice had become tense. Marcus was surprised. "Sir, is there a replay on the cameras? I want to see that man's face." A few minutes later, Marcus sent David a clear image of the man's face from the security room. When David looked at the screen, his world collapsed. Robert Hayes, Sergeant Robert Hayes, the man who saved David's life. David immediately ran to the elevator. His heart was beating wildly. He was trying to descend 47 floors in seconds. 2003, Fallujah, Iraq. Lieutenant David Stone's convoy had been ambushed. His vehicle had overturned. He was wounded in the leg and trapped in the car. Enemy fire all around. He was on the brink of death. That's when Sergeant Robert Hayes appeared. He reached David under enemy fire, pulled him from the vehicle, carried him to safety. He saved David by risking his own life. "Don't leave me," David had screamed. "I won't leave you," Robert had said. No soldier left behind. David never saw Robert again after that day. They were assigned to different units. He searched for him for years, but couldn't find him. When the elevator stopped at the lobby floor, David ran out. Robert was standing outside the hotel door in the cold weather. David shouted. Robert turned. When he saw David, surprise crossed his face. "David, are you David Stone?" The two men hugged each other. After 20 years, on a cold Chicago night, in front of a luxury hotel. "I searched for you everywhere," David said. "Everywhere." "I'm here," Robert said simply. David turned around and looked at the lobby. Marcus was still standing there trying to understand what was happening. "Come inside," David said. "We have things to talk about." When they entered the lobby, the entire atmosphere changed. Customers were whispering. Marcus was staring in shock. David approached Marcus. "Who is this man to you?" "Mr. Stone, I was just—" Marcus began to stammer. "This man saved my life," David said, his voice echoing throughout the lobby. Under enemy fire in Iraq, everyone in the lobby held their breath. "This man, Sergeant Robert Hayes, is an American hero. And you threw him out for being homeless." Marcus's face turned white. "I didn't know. You didn't need to know," David said sternly. "You needed to show respect." David turned to Robert. "Bobby, let's go up to the penthouse suite. We have a lot to talk about." As they walked toward the elevator, David gave Marcus one last look. "We'll talk in my office tomorrow morning." In the penthouse, Robert learned how David had built his life. Technology company, billion-dollar deals, worldwide business empire. "What about you?" David asked. "What happened to you?" Robert's story was very different. Return from war, PTSD, unemployment, divorce, financial problems, eventually homelessness. "I failed," Robert said. "No," David said determinedly. "The system failed you." That night, David arranged everything for Robert. First an apartment, then medical help, then job opportunities. But most importantly, he reminded Robert of his worth. "You're my hero, Bobby. Everything I've achieved since that day is because of the sacrifice you made." The next morning, Marcus Webb sat in David Stone's office. Regret and fear could be read on his face. "Marcus," David said, "what happened last night is unacceptable. Mr. Stone, I apologize. If I had known, that's the problem, David interrupted. You didn't need to know. Every human being deserves respect. Especially veterans. David pulled an envelope from his desk. I'm offering you 2 choices. First, you resign. Second, you develop a program for veterans. Marcus chose the second option. 3 months later, the Heroes Welcome program launched at the Ritz-Carlton, Chicago. Free meals for veterans, temporary accommodation, job search support. Robert became the director of this program. Now he worked in the same lobby, but this time with respect and honor. A year later, Robert became the director of veteran employment at David's company. He found jobs for thousands of veterans, gave them hope. David and Robert's friendship became stronger than before. They met every week, talked about the past, planned the future. That evening, David Stone stood on the penthouse balcony. Below, Chicago's lights were shining. Robert joined him. Look at that lobby, David said. Everything started there, and everything changed there, Robert said. You saved me twice, Bobby, once in Iraq, and once here. How so? You reminded me what real wealth is, not money, but friendship, not success, but helping others. The 2 men looked at the city lights. Below in the same lobby, there were new arriving guests, but now none of them were judged by their appearance. Marcus Webb now personally attended to veterans. He said, "Welcome, hero," to every veteran who came. Sometimes life's greatest lessons come from the most unexpected moments. Sometimes the richest person needs to find his homeless friend again to realize he has lost the most valuable thing. And sometimes an encounter in a hotel lobby changes the lives of 2 men. One has wealth but his soul is poor. The other has nothing but his heart is rich. That night, David Stone learned the most important lesson of his life. True wealth is not in what you have, but in who you have it for. 6 months after that transformative night, the Heroes Welcome program had become a model for luxury hotels across the country. Robert Hayes stood in the same lobby where he had once been humiliated, now wearing a crisp suit and a badge that read Director of Veteran Services. The program had housed over 200 homeless veterans, found employment for 150, and provided emergency assistance to countless others. What started as one man's humiliation had become a nationwide movement of recognition and support. David Stone's technology company had also transformed. The Veteran Employment Initiative had hired over 500 former military personnel, bringing unique skills and perspectives that enhanced every department. David often said that hiring veterans wasn't charity, it was smart business. Marcus Webb had undergone his own transformation. The experience with Robert had shattered his worldview and rebuilt it on a foundation of genuine service. He now personally greeted every guest regardless of their appearance, and had become an advocate for treating all people with dignity. One evening, as Robert prepared to close his office for the day, a young veteran approached him. The man was in his 20s, wearing clothes that had seen better days, carrying everything he owned in a worn backpack. "Excuse me," the young man said hesitantly. "I heard there's someone here who helps veterans." Robert smiled, remembering his own desperate night just months earlier. "What's your name, soldier?" "Michael Chen, sir. I just got back from Afghanistan. I've been staying at shelters, but they're always full. I don't know where else to go." Robert placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "You came to the right place, Michael. Let's get you set up with a room tonight, and tomorrow we'll talk about your future." As Robert helped Michael complete the intake paperwork, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the streets to the penthouse, from humiliation to recognition, from despair to purpose. That same evening, David Stone received a call that would expand their impact even further. The caller was from the Department of Veterans Affairs, requesting a meeting about implementing the Heroes Welcome model at a federal level. "Mr. Stone," the official said, "your program has achieved something we've been trying to accomplish for decades. You've created a bridge between the private sector and veteran services that actually works." David looked out his penthouse window at the city below. The The credit belongs to Sergeant Robert Hayes and every veteran who had the courage to ask for help when they needed it most. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, with representatives from major hotel chains, technology companies and government agencies. What had started as a friendship renewed in a hotel lobby was about to become national policy. 3 years later, Robert Hayes stood before a joint session of Congress, testifying about veteran homelessness and the power of public-private partnerships. The boy who had grown up in foster care, the soldier who had served in Iraq, the homeless veteran who had been thrown out of a hotel, was now addressing the nation's lawmakers. Distinguished members of Congress, Robert began, his voice strong and clear. 3 years ago, I was living on the streets of Chicago, forgotten by the society I had served. Today I stand before you not as a success story but as proof that every veteran's service has value, regardless of their current circumstances. David Stone sat in the gallery, watching his friend with pride. The Heroes Welcome program now operated in over 500 hotels nationwide, had housed 10,000 veterans, and had achieved an 85% success rate in transitioning veterans to permanent housing and employment. But more than the numbers, David was proud of the change in how society viewed veterans. Robert's story had been featured in documentaries, news programs and social media campaigns that changed hearts and minds across the country. Marcus Webb had been promoted to Vice President of Guest Services for the entire Ritz-Carlton chain, with a mandate to implement dignity-based hospitality training at every property. His personal transformation had become a case study in business schools about the power of empathy and customer service. As Robert concluded his congressional testimony, he shared the lesson that had changed his life. I learned that true service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. For some of us, the most important mission begins when we come home and find ways to serve our fellow veterans who are still fighting battles on American soil. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Robert, it was for every veteran who had ever struggled with the transition from military to civilian life, every person who had been judged by their appearance rather than their character, and every individual who had found the courage to extend a helping hand to someone in need. That evening, David and Robert sat in the same penthouse where their reunion had taken place. The city lights sparkled below them, but their focus was on the future. You know what I think about sometimes, David said. What would have happened if Marcus had shown you kindness that first night instead of throwing you out? Robert considered the question. I probably would have left after warming up for a few minutes, and we never would have found each other again. Sometimes we need the darkness to appreciate the light. David nodded. And sometimes we need to lose everything to understand what really matters. As they prepared to part ways for the evening, Robert handed David a small wrapped package. I wanted you to have this, he said. Inside was Robert's Purple Heart medal, the one he had worn on his jacket that cold night in the lobby. Bobby, I can't take this, David protested. You earned this, and now I'm giving it to someone who's earned it in a different way. Robert replied. You saved more lives in the last 3 years than I saved in Iraq. This belongs with someone who understands that real courage isn't just about what you do in war, it's about what you do with the peace that follows. David accepted the medal with tears in his eyes. It would sit on his desk as a daily reminder that success without service is empty, and that the greatest victories come not from what we achieve for ourselves but from what we make possible for others. The story of Robert Hayes and David Stone had become more than just a tale of friendship renewed. It had become a movement that changed how America treats its veterans, how businesses view their social responsibility, and how individuals understand their power to make a difference. But at its heart, it remained the simple story of two friends who found each other again in the most unlikely place, and chose to turn one moment of injustice into a lifetime of service to others. Share this story and click the notification bell so you can be immediately notified of these stories we publish every day. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel because tomorrow I have another story especially for you.